the OECD add a third pillar to its global tax reform proposals? Has the coronavirus breathed new life into digital services taxes? And does the EU really need new taxes to address the economic impact of the health crisis? Welcome to this 6th episode of IBFD's Tax Takes, videos on the global tax implications of the COVID-19 crisis. We'll be focusing in this episode on digital taxation and global tax reform. I'm Barry Larking, and I'm very happy to have with me today Pasquale Pistone, who, apart from being a professor at 2 universities, one in Vienna, the University of Economics and Business in Austria, and another in the University of Salerno in Italy, is also the academic chairman of the IBFD. So I'm very happy to have you with me today, Pasquale, talking all the way from Naples, which is a fair way away from Amsterdam, where I am. Pasquale, let's get started. When or before the COVID crisis hit, there was only one topic of conversation amongst international tax lawyers, and that was the OECD's, or the Inclusive Frameworks, Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 proposals. Many people are saying that they should be put on hold while the global economy recovers. If we just look at Pillar 1, that's the proposal to extend market states' taxing rights to tackle digital business. Do you agree that that proposal should be postponed?
Barry, thanks very much for this question. It's a difficult one to answer. On the one hand, I think that putting things on hold at the time in which the development is very uncertain is something wise. I think, when there is an acute crisis, we should avoid taking too quick decisions. But at the same time, I think that COVID has also highlighted the importance to take decisions that enhance the neutrality between the so-called virtual world and the real world. We can do things remotely much more than we had thought. And this is something which we should sort of keep in mind. I think that at a certain moment, we need to take a decision on Pillar 1. And I don't think that we should postpone it indefinitely. We should find a decision that achieves level playing field between virtual way of doing business and the so-called traditional brick and mortar economy and the physical way of doing business. So I think putting that on hold is perhaps not the right thing to do, but doing something in a way that brings them towards convergence is a good thing for our future.
Okay, but do you see a tension there between what's going on in the if you like, the traditional world, where countries are basically saying that they're not going to enforce their traditional taxing rights in the COVID crisis with teleworking, lockdowns, and so on? Do you see a tension between that approach and the Pillar 1 approach, which is doing precisely the opposite, and that is expanding the source states' taxing rights?
Well, I think that countries have the right to remain the masters of their international tax policy decisions together with the national tax policy ones. So from this perspective, it's important that countries have the opportunity to decide whether or not to enforce their taxing rights at this moment. I don't see necessarily a tension with the fact that we want to strengthen the power of the source countries and the market countries in connection with Pillar 1. I think that this is an exceptional moment. So if countries at this moment don't want to enforce their rights, we should not think about non-taxation. We should rather think about the fact that this is an exceptional circumstance and it should not affect the developments of Pillar 1.
Okay, Pillar 2. This would be a new approach to taxing global business. It would be introducing a global minimum tax on global business. Many countries, as a result of the COVID crisis, are considering tax breaks, lower tax rates, incentives to boost recovery. How do you see that interacting or impacting on the Pillar 2 proposals?
Yeah, Barry, so far I have actually until the COVID-19 crisis, I've been more critical about Pillar 1 than I have been about Pillar 2. I have to some extent also been writing in support of Pillar 2 and the need to do something to prevent the so-called race to the bottom. But things have significantly changed. With the COVID-19 crisis, we understand the so-called regulatory goals of taxation have become more important also in the developed economies. So I think that from this perspective, we should understand that this is an exceptional moment and that we should not bring together all forms of low taxation. So we should consider that in some cases, if there is a good rationale behind a given tax break, tax incentive, then it's not a good idea to bring it together with situations in which we want to prevent the race to the bottom for reasons which are related to countering or preventing aggressive tax planning. So I think, this should give us, this is food for thought, and we should certainly be careful about this.
Absolutely. I mean, there are those that say that allowing carve-outs for incentives generally from Pillar 2 goes against the whole concept of Pillar 2. But I think what you're saying is there are good incentives and there are bad incentives, and it's a question of deciding which of the two the COVID type incentive fall into as to whether they would be covered by the Pillar 2.
Yeah, Barry, I mean, in my writing, I've been writing with other colleagues at IBFD, and we have expressed some concern for carve-outs, also because carve-outs can be the object of lobbying, and we are believers in some sort of good practice at avoiding the scope for lobbying. But at this moment, the problem is that the situation is so extreme that it is a sort of commonly perceived problem. So what I'm saying is that there should be some kind of international standard for the type of incentives that should be tolerated in connection with the reactivation of the economy, if I can call it like that.
Yeah.
So because there are some fields of business which are severely hit by this, and there are other fields which have super profits because of the change, of change to the remote.
Indeed, but you mentioned super profits there, and I've mentioned the Pillar 3 idea. These are connected issues. In some sense, it's a new idea to introduce a third pillar to the OECD's Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 that would in fact tax these super profits, or whatever you like to call them, excess profits, windfall profits that would not have been there but for the COVID-19 crisis. Now, how do you see that in terms of policy and practicality?
Yeah, Barry, I think that super profits are super profits, and that's my starting point. So in other words, we have to make sure that there is an actual taxation of profits, but at the same time, we have to consider that there could be alternative ways to allow countries to exercise their taxing sovereignty in respect of a situation which is significantly different from the overall standards. I'm actually, I understand that there are proposals for a Pillar 3, but I actually wonder whether we need to have a proliferation of pillars. I mean, it would be like a Greek temple if we keep building up all those pillars. In my idea, we could also approach that at the level of Pillar 1. If we consider that we strengthen the powers of some countries to exercise their taxing rights, and we do it in a way that it's non-ring-fenced, and profits can still be taxed, but at the same time, if we go for digital services taxes, which seems what several people are now, supporting more and more, in particular in the European Union, then I think that can still be a satisfactory solution. I want to keep it simple, and I think that we should avoid creating further differences between what is a super profit and what is not a super profit.
Well, I can understand that there are practical issues, and I think that's a good response on that point. But isn't it the case that there are multinationals out there that are making huge amounts of profits on the back of the health crisis? Isn't it right that they should contribute part of those profits to, for example, helping the recovery?
I think that it's a matter of how you see, taxation, how you conceive taxation, and I think that multinational enterprises should pay a fair share of tax. So we should counter at the global level the non-reporting, or also the situation in which there are schemes that prevent multinational from paying fair share of taxes. I am not really inclined to say that multinational enterprises should be taxed more than they would otherwise be. But I am in favor of strengthening the power of the so-called market country. And from that perspective, enforcing taxes like digital services tax at this moment could be a reasonable approach to allow the market country to get the contribution of multinational enterprises, which have been making more business because of the COVID-19 crisis. So that is perhaps my way out of this. So not taxing those multinationals.
Sorry, say it again.
Not taxing multinational enterprises more than they actually, they have to. So it's still taxing them, and taxing profits, and at the same time also considering that digital services tax at this moment can perhaps allow those countries to get a contribution from all multinational.
Okay, so are you saying that unilateral digital service taxes are actually okay alongside, if you like, the Pillar 1 proposals, which are ultimately designed to counteract this proliferation of unilateral digital service taxes? So you see it as a kind of symbiosis that both could actually coexist, at least for some time?
Barry, I think that we should reconsider the role of digital services tax in the European Union. The word unilateral is often used for anything which is not agreed upon by the US. And I am scared about having too many slightly different digital services tax. But I would not say the same in case the European Commission makes progress with the idea of a European digital service tax. However, what I think is important is to establish some kind of clear link between how a turnover is taxed in a country, the market country may be in connection with the levying of the digital service tax, and how profits of multinational enterprises are taxed. Because the proposal that was released a couple of years back is saying that they mention in it the recital, they expect that there will be a deduction from corporate income tax. But when we put things in the recital and we don't clearly tell how this is going to take place, the recital without an article is worth nothing.
Yeah, so I mean, you're looking at the double taxation sort of risk of unilateral digital service taxes generally. I mean, would you expect countries to be more easygoing, if you like, in terms of granting double taxation relief, like the US has sort of, been taken a fairly hard stance on that? Would you expect those countries to be perhaps a little bit more prepared to grant double taxation relief for these taxes in the crisis situation?
Barry, you take me back with this question to the idea of neutrality, which for me is really important. I think that the ones who decide, the business which decides to go, let's say, digital, shouldn't be penalized. So shouldn't be subject to higher chances of double taxation than they would otherwise be. So I think that it's important to have some kind of link between taxes levied on turnover, hopefully in the European Union, and taxes levied on profits on a worldwide basis. I think that that is something important. So we need to understand not just whether there should be relief given, but also relief on what. If you have a tax on turnover, then the turnover can be a proxy for value creation, which I clearly think it is, and to some extent also a proxy for profits. And there I'm a bit more skeptical because, the tax base is perhaps different, and I don't think that the country of residence of the enterprise should give a relief for the whole taxes levied on turnover in another country, because that turnover can include something which is not income. So it would not be fair. But that's really the direction in which I think we should go.
Yeah, well, we will see how things go. I mean, I guess, aside from the sort of technical arguments, I guess everybody would be hoping that countries would take a sort of fairly lenient approach to avoiding unnecessary, if you like, hardship at this time. But we will obviously see that, and that's a political issue. Talking of digital, what about things like Zoom? We're all, we're working at the moment using all these programs.
But we're not using Zoom.
No, we're not. No, but similar programs. I mean, do you see that as sort of lending strength to arguments in favour of taxing digital businesses because of we see how important they really are? Or what's your take on that?
I mean, personally, I'm very grateful to all these digital tools that allow us to interact at distance. And I think, had this crisis happened about 20 years back, then we wouldn't, the economy would have suffered even more. However, I think that this is also an opportunity for Zoom and the other, similar tools to get more profits out of that. You don't necessarily get profits from the person which gets the service. You get profits from a variety of other sources. So they are making more profits than they would otherwise be. And they are doing that because they have a good business, concept. And I'm happy, when you have a good business concept, I think you should make more money. But the point is, from a tax perspective, Zoom wouldn't be making that much money if it hadn't been, used by all those countries. And in fact, a part of value creation of Zoom is also in countries other from that in which Zoom was developed. And that's my take.
Yeah, and also they wouldn't be making so much money if it wasn't for the crisis. Talking of which, I mean, you could say that that's sort of opportunist. Let's have a look at what the EU is doing, and I think we need to round off now. But very quickly, you've signed a manifesto with about 13 other academics in the EU, calling for more taxing powers from the EU. In order to, I think, combat the economic impact of the crisis. Do you really think that new taxing powers or new taxes are needed? And if so, what would they look like?
I don't think we need more taxes. I think we need, a better understanding of, how the EU can implement its own policies. The EU is obliged to solidarity, and I think that we have a European Parliament. And at the moment, we have accountability towards the national states, but we don't have a real accountability in tax towards the European people, even if we have a parliament. So I think that if on the one hand, the European Union is obliged to provide solidarity in case of emergency to its people, then the fact that we can do that by shifting some taxes to the European level, and this could be also, the digital services tax, or taxes, Pigouvian taxes with regulatory purposes like financial transaction tax, in order to steer money towards the more productive purposes, I think that would be a more transparent way of, taxation with representation.
So you would see it as a shift of taxes, not necessarily additional taxes?
Well, we don't have really digital services taxes in every country at this moment. I am saying that if we set up digital taxes at the digital services tax at the European level, that would automatically deprive member states of the right to levy them at the national level. Yeah, so I mean, there could be new taxes or taxes which are currently levied at the national level that could be relocated to the European level. But this will enhance democracy, and this will also enhance accountability towards European people rather than deals among states.
Thank you, Pasquale. I think these are issues that will keep the academic and the business world occupied for much longer than this. The time we've had to discuss them in this video. Thank you to our viewers. If you'd like to find out more about this and other IBFD tax takes videos, please check out the IBFD's related web pages. So once again, thank you very much.
My pleasure.